Hello comedians, on today's video I am going to give you plenty of ideas on how we can write immediately good quality material when we sit down to create good quality material. Instead of sitting back looking at a blank page and just not knowing how to get our ideas onto it so we can create sets and perform good comedy. So here's what we're going to do. We are going to write down topics of what we are going to discuss. And when we open up that page, I want you to do it right now. I want you to write down the word yourself. Just write down yourself, and on the next page, you're going to write down family. On the following page, you're going to write down hobbies. And then a page after that, you're going to write down work, right? You can kind of see where we're going. Flip back to the first page where you've written yourself, right? What we're going to do here is write absolutely every single piece of information as quick as we can. We can give ourselves a little period of time. Set a stopwatch of maybe 2 minutes. And in those 2 minutes, write as much little points about yourself as possible. They do not need to be connected. It doesn't need to be a bio. It doesn't need to be an order. It doesn't need to be an expression. Just write a few very obvious things about yourself. What kind of hair do you have? What way do you like to dress? What are the immediate, most personal things you can write about yourself? We're not writing jokes. We're just taking notes. I want you to repeat this process for all of the other points on all of the other pages. So you move over to where you have family written. I want you to write down the most obvious things about your family. Okay, I hope you're enjoying the video. I just want to interrupt very briefly and say, if you're interested in me critiquing in a positive way your performance, your comedy performance, well then that service is open to you. The information in how to go about getting that done, and as well as supporting the channel, is all written in the information in the description box. So drop down there, check it out. If you're interested, shoot me an email and I would love to check out your comedy and give you some positive tips and ideas. Right, back to the video. What we're going to do now is we are going to start to build the blocks for humor, all right? So if we go back to our first page where we've wrote down information about ourselves, the very first thing you wrote down on that page, there's a punchline hidden behind it. So now I want to go a step further. On a new page, we're going to have one-liners, and you're going to write the word one-liners and you're going to write yourself, right? So these are all the one-liners about yourself. So you're going to go back to where all the information you wrote about yourself, and you're going to write the first thing you wrote about yourself, and you're going to come up to a punchline. So you rewrite the sentence and you come up to a punchline about it. Because in comedy, we set up our audience with information and then we knock them down with the punchline. And the sooner we can get to the jokes, the better, because the punchline is king. That's the important part, because that's what gets the laughter. And if they laugh at our jokes, then they like us. If they like us, well then that kind of ticks a lot of boxes, right? That's what we want. We want the audience to like us. We want them to be on board with what we're saying. We want them to be listening intently at the setup so they are there for the punchline. Now, what we're doing here is we're ticking all the basics with these very easy to do writing situations. So we have our sentence about ourselves and we have a punchline directly after it. Perhaps you can force yourself to come up with more punchlines after that one little piece of information. 3 is a magic number. If you can come up with 3 punchlines about that one little piece of information about yourself, fantastic. These punchlines do not need to be excellent. They don't need to be humorous. They don't need to be really funny. They just need to be a punchline you're trying to be funny. The more you do this, the funnier they will become, because practice and experience is everything. But it's good to start off correctly. So I want you to go back and fill up this new page of one-liners about yourself. Keep going back to the notes you had about yourself where you're not thinking about any comedy. Bring over one little piece of information about yourself at a time. Don't complicate it. Just rewrite it and come up with 1 to 3 punchlines about each of those sections, each of those little snippets of information. Now, if you do that with as many lines about yourself as you can, and here's another tip. If you have a punchline that fits multiple pieces of information about yourself, then we can consider all of those little pieces of information about ourselves to be the same sentence. So on stage, you can say the same thing. You can say just one sentence that describes that section of you, and you can have all of these punchlines to come after it. And sometimes you can just say the same sentence again in a different perception in a different way and have more punchlines as well. That's just dragging out the set. Already with just information about yourself, you can see that you might even have 5 minutes if you want to go in and discuss different areas of yourself, because you might have 3 punchlines about your opener, you might have 2 punchlines about another bit of information, you might have these punchlines about that. All of a sudden you got a snappy set that people are liking, and they're going to like more the more you practice it on stage. But this video is about getting it created in the first place. So I want you to repeat that process with every single page. We write the information section on one page. On a new page, we write the one-liners to each piece of information. Obviously, we rewrite the sentence that we were writing the punchline about, just so we can keep track on what's going on. After that, I want you to come up with a little story. Here's how we are going to tie it all together and actually create a set for the stage. So we're going to approach the stage. What do we do at the beginning? We talk about ourselves. So here's where you say a couple of things about yourself and you have the punchline after it. And every time, if you're typing this, every time you do a punchline, you hit enter twice, right? So there's a little gap in the writing of white mark in the writing after every joke. And we keep going. So every time we hit a punchline, there's a gap. And what we want is we want to fill up our set with as many pieces of paper as possible, because we want all that white showing. We want to realize that we're hitting enter twice or space twice after every punchline. And if it's consistently white throughout the page, that's where all our laughs are going to be. And that is a sign of a really strong set, because too many comedians starting out in the career fall into the trap and the habit of believing that they need to set up information and describe scenarios way too much when you don't. If you have a little bit of information about what it is you do for work, all you need to do is say that information, what is it you do for work, get to the punchline. You don't need to describe your perception of the job. You don't need to describe this or that. If it doesn't get a laugh, it doesn't really have much point in being there. It's about getting laughs as consistently as possible. And the big moments, the big joke that we have when we create a piece of information the first time, yes, if it's a fantastic piece, it can come at the end. But too many time beginning comedians think that, well, I got this great joke at the end, therefore I'm going to leave my audience hanging on while I set up this one big huge scenario. And what we're doing with this writing exercise is we are throwing that out the window, because we do not want our audiences sitting there for a long period of time to get to a joke, because the joke might not be as good as you think it is. And even if the joke is as good as you think it is, the audience would rather laugh consistently smaller pockets than they would a big pocket at the end, and you trying to cover many topics just to get to the end of one big joke, where one big joke exists. So keep them laughing consistently with this very easy writing technique. And the best thing about this is you will start to write as soon as you possibly can. As soon as you sit down with that pad, you will start to write, because you're always going to be able to look back at your original notes, which only took you 2 minutes to write out, about yourself, about your work, about your family, about your relationships, about any other topic you want to write down all the information. You can drag out any one of those little sentences about yourself, as basic as they sound. And the more basic they are, the easier they are to connect to the audience. And if you can create a set out of just those things, then you're going to have a lovely, really easy to digest set for that audience that have been there for a long time, watched many comedians, and all of a sudden you come out with material that is precise. You are getting to a punchline after every single time the information change. Every time they learn something new about you, there's a punchline to come. And that rewards the audience for listening to you. And if you reward the audience for listening to you as a comedian, they're going to be happier to listen to you as the set goes on. And you are going to be able to set them up with longer setups as you progress as a writer, because you're going to know how to keep it snappy, always putting in little funny observations. Now, I haven't told you exactly what the punchlines are in this because I want you to suck at it. I want you to not listen to what I find a funny observation or a funny punchline, the definition of it is. I want you to make your own. Even if you're incorrect and you perform it, you're still going to be technically correct, because if you think it's a joke, then it's a joke. And by going on stage and delivering it, you're going to know in your set what is a great joke and what is not a great joke, and you're going to be able to take out the ones that don't work, because the study is done. Here's the great news: whenever there's comedians that have written way what they feel too many jokes for a set, if you put in more jokes per set and then another comedian gets on stage and they might have more experience at writing and they only do half the amount of jokes that you do, people are always going to prefer the comedian that did more jokes, that tried harder. Even if the vast majority of those jokes failed, you're going to be remembered for the jokes that worked. Whether the comedian that only did a very few jokes and they all worked is only going to be remembered for doing only a few jokes. So this habit is going to get you forced into writing punchline after every time we tell them a little bit of information. And if you become that comedian straight out the gate, you are going to be a joy to watch very early on. So get writing right now. Information, another page for your punchlines about each single bit of information you wrote down. Go get writing and yeah, do it now.